All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about place value with our decimals. We're also going to be talking about rounding with decimals. A couple things that we should probably mention when we're talking about place value with decimals. Basically, nothing we're saying here is going to supersede what we have said before about our place value. So if I've got a number like 4,206, all of these places stay the same. This first place past our decimal point is still our ones place. The second place past our decimal point is still our tens place. Third place is still our hundreds. Fourth place is still our thousands. So notice that all of these place values are larger than 1. We've got our decimal point. And everything to the left of the decimal point is larger than 1. Now, when we start moving to the left of the decimal point, the same sort of pattern arises. So say I had something like 3, 1, 8, 5, 2. Each of these place values follows a fairly easy to spot pattern, but just like every single place value to the left increases this by power of 10, it decreases by power of 10. This, instead of being a 1th place, this actually starts with our tenths. This is the tenths place. The next place would be our hundredths place. I suppose it helps if I spell that hundredth place. And notice that we have this suffix of ths. This tells us that these are, in fact, equivalent to fractions. Third place here, that's our thousandth place. THS. There we go. Helps if I can spell too. Our 10,000ths. Our 100,000ths. And if I were to continue on in this direction, I would have millionths, 10 millionths, 100 millionths. So it's pretty easy to see this pattern that as we move out from our decimal point to the left, they get larger. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and so on. And when we move to the right, they get progressively smaller. Tenths, and by the way, this 1/10 is, this right here is basically 1/10, or actually in this case it would be 3/10, plus 1/100th. This would be 8,000ths, 8,000ths. 5 10,000ths, 200,000ths. I know that once we get into decimals, a lot of folks feel like, hey, this is more familiar territory, but guess what? They're still fractions, just specialized types of fractions. But these are all smaller than 1. Okay. One of the things that we should talk about is how do we say something like this? Well, when we're talking about decimals, we're going to Let's see here. So let's talk about saying or writing decimals and words. So say I've got something like 45 and 16 thousandths. How I would say this is, first we're going to say our whole numbers, and we would say that as, 45. Our decimal point, we actually are going to use the word and. And then what we do is we're going to say what digit or what number this would be. This would be just a 16, so this would be 16. But we take a look at that last place value. And in this case, our last place value, we've got our tenths, hundredths, thousandths. This is going to be 16 thousandths. There we go. Okay, let's start to talk about rounding. And when we're rounding decimal places, our process is very, very similar to what we did before. So say we've got something like 6.2874. And let's say I'm going to round this to our hundredth place. Remember what we did first. First thing that we did is we are going to find our rounding place. Here are hundredths, we've got our tenths and our hundredths. It's right there. Hundredths is something that we're going to do a lot of because our currency is in hundredths. I look one place value over. When I see that this place value is 5 or more, I'm going to add 1 to my rounding place. 2. So we look one place value right, or place to the right. 0 to 4, we do nothing to our rounding place. 5 to 9, we add 1 to the rounding place. So to our rounding place. Just abbreviate that RP. So we're going to just add 1 to that rounding place. So it's going to be 6.29 in this case. And here's where it differs. After that rounding place, we're going to truncate our smaller place values. Now, a couple notes with this. If I'm asking for the hundredths, I always have to have a value there in my hundredths. Even if it is a 0, it needs to be there as a placeholder. So let's take a look what that might be. So say we have something like, say we've got something like 7.9516, and I want to round this to my tenths place. Now here, my tenths place is right here. I'm going to look one place value over, that's 5 or more, so I need to add 1 to this. Notice that I'm going to have to, because I've got a 9 here, and I'm rounding up, I have to add 1 to this, and it means I need to carry, so it's going to become an 8.0, but I am done right there. I have truncated at the tenths place. I always include that rounding place. Okay, one more example, and we're going to call it, and we're going to call that done. So, let's say we've got something like 14.0449. And again, I'm going to round here to my hundredths place, or hundredths place. I find my hundredths place, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. I look one place value over. Here I don't have any, here, that is 4 or less. Even though that this is really, really close to 5 thousandths, if I'm looking more than 2 place values over, I'm looking too far. I'm overthinking this. That's a 4. I do nothing to this particular place. So this is going to be 14.04, and we'd be done. Alrighty, if you have any questions, shoot me a message.